this whole thing could be incredibly disruptive at the worst possible time. We are 4 weeks away from the opening of the January transfer window, arguably the most important January transfer window that Tottenham have had. Morning guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I hope you're all happy, healthy, doing the things that you love, with those that you love doing them with. Guys, I'm Sean Butler, that's Bugsy Malone. This is episode 105 of Tottenham Walks. And it's going to be an extension of episode 103 that we did just 2 days ago, where, if you remember, we spoke about the Juventus board resignations, and we looked at the three possible ways that you could interpret it. One being it increased the likelihood of Conte leaving and going to Juventus because Agnelli was out of the way. Two being it decreased the likelihood of Conte leaving because Juventus were a sinking ship, and in fact we could have looked at it from a more positive light and said maybe Tottenham can utilise the relationships that they have in Italy with the likes of Conte, Paratici, or even players like Kulusevski and Bentancur to try and tap up some of those players and maybe take advantage of any potential fire sales that they have within the playing squad. And that's where I was landing at the time, but behind door three, I did mention there was this outside chance that maybe Fabio Paratici was going to get caught back and dragged back into this whole mess, this quagmire. And we didn't really know, did we, what the likelihood of that was and what the consequences would be. So we didn't really talk too much about it. Well, lo and behold, guys, 2 days later, I go to bed last night and I wake up this morning to the news that Fabio Paratici, according to reports across Italy and in the UK now, that he's been arrested. I'm going to just pick one random article because they're all kind of saying the same thing. I'm going to read it out to you. Despite the resignation and a statement laying out the case for the defence, there are still reports an arrest warrant is being prepared for former Juventus president Andrea Agnelli and Tottenham director Fabio Paratici. The entire board of directors resigned abruptly on Monday evening, with a new set of directors to be appointed in January. There were some suggestions that the resignations were a bid to take some of the legal heat off the club and themselves, but it doesn't seem to have worked. According to La Gazzetta dello Sport, news agency ANSA, and more, the authorities in Turin have prepared an arrest warrant for Agnelli and the other 14 who had already received a warning. They were under investigation last month. That list includes former Juventus director of sport Paratici, who left the club last year to take over at Tottenham Hotspur in the Premier League. A statement on the official Juventus website goes to great pains to point out that financial fraud was not one of the accusations. Nonetheless, there are various allegations linked to that, including false statements, obstruction of financial authorities, and false paperwork. In all, there were 16 people under investigation, including Juventus as a club. Not good news. Looks more like it wasn't door one or door two, it was door three. Paratici could get dragged back into the quagmire, into the troubles. And how does that affect Tottenham? Well, it could affect us in It could affect us in a bunch of different ways, but I'd imagine that none of them are particularly good. Bearing in mind, right, that the period of investigation was for like a 3-year period that was when Paratici was in charge. I don't think that there's any correlation. I would be surprised if there's any consequences or any connection to any of the deals we've done recently with regards Bentancur and Kulusevski specifically or primarily. However, this investigation stems back to starting early on in this year, and Juventus's 21-22 reports or accounts were only released in September of this year. So there's every possibility that maybe the authorities are also going to investigate those sets of reports that they couldn't have done back in January, back in February, March or April, because they hadn't been released back then. The deals for Kulusevski and for Bentancur will be assessed on the financial results that were made in 2021-22 financial reports of September. So if they do audit those reports, and I'm guessing that they would, then you never know. Maybe there might be more problems with regards to those deals. There's also the complications of the deal with Romero. Even though Tottenham signed him from Atalanta, in order for Tottenham to loan him from Atalanta had to, I'm pretty sure, exercise the option, not the obligation, but the option to purchase Romero from Juventus for 15 million euros before Atalanta could then loan him to Tottenham for a year, which then got obviously finalised in the summer. So is there any concerns or complications with the Romero deal? Who knows? Those things might also be uncovered in the September accounts that have just been released. So maybe the reason why this whole thing has come about now in November is because the authorities have just looked through the accounts that were released in September and found more wrongdoing. And despite the fact that in April I looked back, Paratici and some of the others of that 15 that were named were cleared of all charges, that's not the same as being tried in a court of law, being found not guilty, and then you can't be tried for the same crime twice, like double jeopardy, like they have in America, in the UK, and other jurisdictions. I don't know what the jurisdiction or the rules are on double jeopardy in Italy, but it's a moot point anyway because he wasn't tried, he was investigated and released. Maybe there's more information that's come out in the most recent set of figures that connects the dots. And so from Tottenham's perspective, I'm not saying that there's anything to be worried about here, but there's a possibility that those deals with Kulusevski and Bentancur and Romero could be under scrutiny as well, to see if there's any wrongdoing on anybody's part. And look, Paratici was the director of football. I said this a couple of days ago, guys. Like, he would have known. Surely he would have known what was going on. A few people in the comments were saying it doesn't work like that in Juventus. The board would handle those things, and I don't know. So maybe they're right and I'm wrong. But I would be incredibly surprised if the hiding of people's salaries, the paying under the table, and missing tax payments for certain players, surely that stuff would be on some level known by the guy who's dealing with the deals in the first place. So if there is wrongdoing, how does that factor in? How does that affect Tottenham, right? To me, well, there's three outcomes, right? If he's found guilty of something and I don't know, if it's a criminal investigation and there's a prison sentence, then obviously he couldn't do his job. So that would result in him leaving Tottenham. If he's found guilty and there's no super significant sentence, but his reputation's destroyed, would Daniel Levy want to carry on that relationship? Was Daniel Levy aware of this stuff before he signed? You'd hope so. If he wasn't, Daniel Levy would be furious. I would be furious if I hired somebody and wasn't made aware of any of these kind of troubles, the sword of Damocles hanging over the neck of a person you've employed to recreate the entire model. And that's what Paratici's job's supposed to be. He's not just to hire and fire players, but he's supposed to be bringing in backroom staff that was taking care of the scouting network and the youth development and everything that was football related. He was given, allegedly, an awful lot of authority to redirect Tottenham under his vision, a vision that he obviously sold to Daniel Levy last summer or the summer before last. If this thing all turns out to be like no smoke without fire, and Daniel Levy says that this is embarrassing for Tottenham Hotspur at best, and at worst we're dragged into some of these complications, I'd be very surprised if Daniel Levy would continue to have faith and trust in a guy who's caught up in some shenanigans that looks bad. It's the reputation is the least of our worries, but it's still a big deal in my opinion. So if Paratici was relieved, and I'm just speculating and hypothesizing here, I'm not suggesting he should be, but if he was, then what does that do for the project? What does that do for Tottenham's supposed path of Daniel Levy being removed from the responsibilities of dealing and negotiating for players? Does Daniel Levy take back over? What does it mean for Conte? Would Conte sign a new contract now? So we spoke about this 2 days ago and said maybe it decreases the likelihood or increases the likelihood of him leaving and going to Juventus. I don't think he'll go to Juventus, But if Paratici's not around, is Conte going to want to stay and work with a new director of football that would have to be employed? And who would that be? This whole thing could be incredibly disruptive at the worst possible time. We are 4 weeks away from the opening of the January transfer window, arguably the most important January transfer window that Tottenham have had because of the things that are happening elsewhere in the Premier League, with new ownership coming in likely in Liverpool and Manchester United, the threat of Newcastle looming large, Arsenal re-emerging as a title favourite, and Chelsea and Liverpool slipping down a little bit. You know, there's opportunities and there's threats everywhere you look in the Premier League, and Tottenham, if we did it the right way, could possibly steal a march and cement ourselves and go on to that next level. If you do it the wrong way, you could get left behind, and it all could hinge on this January window, which now looks more uncertain than ever. If our director of football is distracted not only by having to figure out loan deals if Harry Winks gets sent back and Giovanni Lo Celso or Serge Reguilon or any of those players get sent back, and those things we see as distractions about trying to find new homes, temporary housing for these guys, whilst we also try and figure out what's the best situation for our players and the players need to come in. That's a hard enough job for Paratici to do anyway, let alone if he's got legal issues that are criminal also hanging over his head. It's an absolute disaster to have this thing surrounding Tottenham right now. It's very, very, very disturbing. I don't know whether there's any truth to any of it. I'm assuming, as I said the other day, if an entire board resigns from the club, I don't think you do that if you're innocent. I don't believe that you would do that if you're innocent. Having said that, innocent until proven guilty, but it doesn't look good for me. And if Paratici's getting dragged back in, then, you know, my thoughts today have moved from being a positive that Tottenham could go in there and try and sign De Ligt or Danilo, whoever, Locatelli, to thinking, who the hell are we going to sign if we haven't got a director of football? Is Conte going to stay or is he going to leave? He won't sign a new contract at the moment. I don't know. There's so much to think about and talk about. And that's a really good situation to let you know that tonight at 9 o'clock we're going to be on the Irish Hotspur bringing back the Tottenham stream. So check that one out, guys. I'm going to leave it there because I'm all speculating and hypothesising right now. But let me know your thoughts. Are you on the same wavelength as I am? This could be a nightmare. Or it could be all a big nothing burger. But we have to talk about these things. And to me, I'm worried. And it's the worst possible timing for this sort of thing to happen. Like, share and subscribe, guys. I love you. I'll see you on the next one. As always, bye-bye.